Whilst having dinner on our recent trip to Mexico, my wife asked her grandmother, "What does your perfect day look like?" Her response was instant. "My perfect day is to spend time with my loved ones and eat great food." I don't know what surprised me more, the speed of which she answered or the fact that she had an answer at all, because I find it impossible to answer that question. The idea of perfection when boiled down to the context of a singular day feels absurd to me. It doesn't feel possible to do your favorite things every single day for eternity and still consider them perfect. But yet I desperately hope to find my own perfect day and to have one in the future. So that hope begs the questions, can we find something perfect enough to love doing it every single day? Can we somehow create a perfect day? Or does a perfect day just not exist? Let's start with the first question. Can we find something perfect enough to love doing it every single day? Now, the idea of doing something over and over again may feel like an absurd form of torture, like the tale of Sisyphus, who cheated death and was condemned to meaninglessly push a boulder up a mountain repeatedly for eternity. I'm glad we're not that guy, but we are that guy. Every day, no matter what your routine is, you wake up, you work, you eat, and then you sleep. And then you do it all over again the next day, and the next day, and the next day. We are the ones pushing up the boulder every single day. So much so that the Sisyphean act of living our daily lives breathed life into a movement known as Absurdism, which is a philosophy born from the existentialist works of Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, and widely popularized by Albert Camus. In his book, The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus describes this endlessly repetitive and torturous task as absurd. And in the same way, he also views living life as absurd. There is no inherent purpose or meaning for it, and the universe is truly indifferent towards our existence. Therefore, if you are looking for meaning in your life and the repetitiveness of a day, you're absurd. But that's a good thing. Camus argues that when we accept and embrace the absurdity of our lives, we can gain the freedom to make our own meaning from this meaningless world. Just like my wife's grandmother, who said her perfect day is essentially finding meaningful moments. But is that day truly perfect enough to love doing it every single day? Is the process of finding meaning in a day good enough to call it perfect? Absurdism would argue, just like meaning, perfection is unattainable from this world. Perfection means something different for everyone. So there's no possible way of just stumbling upon something naturally perfect. You can't find something that doesn't exist in our universe. So the answer to the question, can we find something perfect enough to love doing it every single day, has to be no. But what absurdism does argue is that it is possible to create meaning from our monotonous lives. So in the same sense, can we create a perfect day? In order to answer this question, we're gonna need to go to hell. One of my favorite games, and one that I truly consider perfect, is Hades. Published in 2020 by one of my favorite developers, Supergiant Games, you play as Zagreus, son of Hades, attempting to escape from the underworld and reach Mount Olympus. Throughout the game, you battle enemies, go through locations, and die. A lot. Hades falls under the genre of games known as roguelike games. And if you've never heard the term, a roguelike game is like the old computer game, Rogue. In Rogue, each playthrough is randomly generated, and when you die in the game, you lose everything and start from scratch. Nothing is saved, and each new run is a blank slate. So you have to beat the game all within one run, and if you don't, you end up doing the same thing over and over and over again. Yet despite the repetitive nature of Rogue, it spawned an entire genre of games that utilize the idea of starting from scratch every time you play. And my favorite of the genre is Hades. Every time you die, you start over from the beginning, hoping to make it out of your eternal torment. Every single run, you go through the same motions, the same locations, and pretty much the same bosses as before. And if you're skilled enough, you might just make it out of hell, only to find yourself unable to be out of hell for long, and dying once again.
However long it takes.
That's right, no matter if you fail or if you win, you always die and start a run anew. It's absurd. So absurd that they even made a sequel by the name of Hades 2, in which you play as Melanoi. Hades 2 follows the exact same formula as before. On the way to defeat the Titan of Time, Kronos, you battle enemies, go through the locations, and again, you die. A lot. From the art and story to the gameplay and mechanics, I consider these games to be as close to perfection as possible. It feels as perfection was created and displayed right in front of me, but every time I play the game, a run doesn't always feel perfect. Sometimes I mess up, which causes an early death. Sometimes I get items that don't help me as much as other items. And sometimes the rewards I get don't help me enough to get to the end. So the logical conclusion, in order for the game to always feel perfect, is to create a perfect run, and do that over and over again. The issue with trying to create a perfect run is the variability of each one. From the power-ups to the rooms you go to even some of the bosses, everything is randomized. It's impossible to create the perfect one, because you'll never have the same one again. Now this is true for concepts beyond Hades. For example, Sisyphus pushing up the rock for eternity never pushes the rock up in the same way. Sometimes he may start with his right hand, sometimes he may start with his left, and sometimes he'll even push off with both hands. Despite which hand he uses to start, the rock will react differently because it isn't perfect. It's misshapen, it's not perfectly smooth, and neither is the floor it rolls on. Even our lives are filled with so much variability that the concept of creating a day that is perfect feels impossible. From the weather to traffic to even how you slept, every little thing or any little choice you make can have an effect on how your day goes. With all this variability within our lives, perfection isn't able to be created. So if we can't find a perfect day, and we can't create a perfect day, all that's left is the final question. Does a perfect day even exist? Throughout this video, I've been talking about two very distinct concepts, Absurdism and the roguelike game Hades. But there is one commonality between both of them, and that is the man, the myth, the legend, Sisyphus. How Sisyphus is portrayed in Camus' book and how he's portrayed in Hades both highlight one specific aspect. He's happy. He's embraced the absurdity of his torment and greets each day with a smile. But how can we imagine Sisyphus happy, especially if perfection can't be found or created? Are you telling me he doesn't look forward to having a perfect day, and that he's happy having the imperfections of this world accompany him? That can't be right. If we were never to have a perfect day in our lives, then we shouldn't really know happiness. So how do we have a perfect day if we can't find one or create one? To answer that, let's ask Sisyphus himself about his time in hell.
You can't entirely escape your past, and yet it's like you get another life to live, with all the wisdom that you picked up along the way.
Sisyphus has had a troubled past. He is not known to be a kind or generous king, but his cunning and trickery of the gods earned him his eternal punishment. And eternity later, he doesn't regard himself highly for his past actions. In fact, he seemingly refuses to dwell too much on his past life. He wants to focus on the future, and the new life he gets to live. He takes his eternal punishment, the monotony of his everyday, and he embraces the absurdity of his life. To him, a day in his punishment can feel like it's perfect. Just like my grandmother-in-law, he is surrounded by the people and boulders he loves and eats the nectar of the gods. But when confronted with the opportunity to be freed from his punishment and his circumstances, he chooses not to leave. Surely one would argue that more perfect days would come if he chose to leave. So why does he choose to stay? There is only one explanation to why Sisyphus refuses to leave. He is clinging to the past in which he's had a perfect day before, or many, and he's desperately hoping for another one in the future. So he's afraid of leaving and venturing off to the unknown when he knows a perfect day can exist here. He's content with waiting for another perfect day, even with the possibility that a perfect day might never come again. So, thanks to Sisyphus, the answer to the question, does a perfect day really exist, has to be a yes. But just not in the way that we hope. For Sisyphus, there was nothing about his circumstances that allowed him to find an upcoming perfect day, nor create it. And with that, he clings on to the past perfect days that he's had. He stunts his growth and his opportunities by clinging on to a place where he feels most comfortable. He stays in this imperfect present and looks forward to a potentially perfect future. But his perfection, the one he hopes for from his future days, is only found in the past. It will never be able to be found or created, but only recognized in hindsight. Imagine your very own perfect day. You might be constructing it from all the perfect days and moments you've had in the past. Just like my grandmother-in-law. She said her perfect day is to spend time with her loved ones and eat great food. But she is pulling from all the moments spent with her loved ones previously and all the great food she has had in the past. There is no way to know what will be perfect for us in the future, or what variations of our past days will create a future perfect day. The only thing we do know is that nostalgia sweetens our past. Just like playing Hades for the first time. I didn't expect these games to be perfect, or for a run to have the perfect combination. But only when finishing a run could I recognize how perfect it truly was. Finally playing Hades 2, after years since finishing the first one, I am filled with a rush of nostalgia for the first game, for the perfect runs I had years ago. And I can look forward to the perfect runs I will have in the future, if any, but recognize that they will not be the same as the ones I have had in the past, because the future will always be uncertain. There is so much variation in what is and what will be, but the past has been cemented. There is no way of knowing you're in a perfect day until you've actually left it. It will always be what was. And if you get stuck in it, if you long for the perfection in your past days, you'll always be waiting for something that may never come. And there is so much more to life than waiting for a perfect day. Don't take it just from me. The man, the myth, the legend, Sisyphus knows this as well. Despite clinging to the past in Hades 1, Sisyphus is nowhere to be found in Hades 2. He finally took the journey and left his eternal prison. And I can only feel that his choice to leave is absurd. It's terrifying, leaving all your comfort for the unknown, in the hope that you will have a perfect day again. But at the same time, it's necessary to embrace the absurdity of it all. Despite the monotonous nature of our lives, despite the nostalgia for perfect times in the past, and despite the numerous runs I've played, there will always be growth in between those moments. And perfection isn't achievable, but it is recognizable. We can't strive to make every single day perfect, but what we can do is recognize when a perfect day graces our Sisyphean lives.